I step my right foot forward and drive my left knee into his left leg. The combination of these actions forces his left leg out from underneath him and causes him to fall forward. As he goes down, I circle around his body and then use his compromised position to drive in a knee strike to his face. Now faster. Once more slowly. Grab, knee, step. I can use either knee, whichever feels more natural. Faster now.
Levantei, entrei, step.
This technique comes in handy when you secure the clinch and your opponent wraps his arm around your waist, as wrestlers tend to do. Instead of holding on to the Muay Thai clinch, I release my right collar tie, wrap my right arm underneath his left arm, and grab his shoulder with my right hand. This opens up my opponent's left side and allows me to drive a knee strike into his midsection. I rotate my body and pull on his arm, forcing him to move forward and disrupting his balance. Once I complete the turn, I throw another knee to his midsection. Throughout this technique, it is very important to push your opponent's head down. So, I establish the Muay Thai clinch, he grabs around my waist, I establish an underhook on his left arm, knee, change my grip as I step, turn, and then knee. Faster now. Once more slowly. Knee, change your grip, step, and knee. A little faster. Now I show how to close the distance, throw an elbow, establish control in the clinch, and then land a knee. Normally when you close the distance, your opponent will want to grab you to take you down. This technique is the defense. So when I close the distance and throw the elbow, my opponent comes in close and hugs me. From here, I pass my right arm under his left arm and place my left hand on the opposite side of his head. This allows me to dominate his head and arm. Then I step my rear foot forward into the outside of his lead leg, rotate, and knee. A lot of people will try to grab you when you get close. This is especially true when you throw an elbow strike. They will attempt to grab you. Once more, a little faster. Slowly, showing the movement. I pass, dominate, and knee. A little faster.
Rápido agora.
Now I spar with my brother using the clinching techniques I just demonstrated. lot of times when you tie up with your opponent, you will end up with an overhook and an underhook, and your opponent will end up with an overhook and an underhook. Since you both have the same grips, this is a neutral position. In order to obtain a dominant position, you must eliminate your opponent's underhook. From here, I have all sorts of options. Why? Because when I get underhooks with both of my arms, I can lock my hands together behind his back. This allows me to use my strength to break him down. I can lift him up. There are multiple things I can do from here because I have a dominant grip. When both you and your opponent have an overhook and an underhook, you both have the same options. In order to eliminate his underhook, you must use what we call pummeling. So I pummel my right arm underneath his left arm to establish an underhook. However, as I do this, my opponent pummels his left arm underneath my right arm, establishing an underhook on my right side. So again, we are both in a neutral position. So now we pummel faster, and eventually I dominate and establish double underhooks. This position is a lot better for me because I have a dominant grip, more options. He is on the outside, which theoretically makes him weaker. So when I lose the pummel and both of my arms are to the outside, I need to obtain a better position. If you can't pummel your arms back in because your opponent's grips are too tight, one technique is to wrap your arms around the outside of your opponent's arms and then squeeze your arms together to break his grip. As his hands break apart, you pummel one of your arms underneath his arm and establish neutral control again. The second escape begins the same as the first, by wrapping my arms around my opponent's arms. However, instead of breaking his grip, I step my rear foot forward into the outside of his lead leg and trip or throw him to the mat. This, of course, requires very fast movement because I have lost my dominant control. If I delay, my opponent will use his dominant grip to take me down. This is the reason why it is so important to always maintain dominant control while in the clinch. One more time. This position here is neutral, 50-50. I have one underhook and my opponent has one underhook. I have various attacks I can utilize and my opponent has those same attacks. Now if he pummels both of his arms underneath my arms, he has dominant control. From here I have to get my grips far away and try to pummel one of my arms underneath his arm. Or I can wrap my arms around the outside of his arms, step behind his lead leg, and throw him. Whichever technique I decide to utilize, I must be quick before my opponent can use his dominant position to attack. If you delay, your opponent will get the upper hand because he is much stronger with double underhooks. Here I demonstrate basic pummeling, which happens a lot in fights. My goal is to win the pummel by establishing double underhooks. Here I won. When you tie up with your opponent in a neutral position in the clinch, there will be very little distance between you to strike. Most of the time, both you and your opponent will be standing upright, battling for dominant control. However, if your opponent gets his hips too far away, then you have an opportunity to land a knee strike. This is the reason why it is important for you to maintain a solid base while pummeling for control in the clinch. I am dominating his underhook arm, and he is dominating my underhook arm. The only real striking options from this position is to attack your opponent's lower body. So, I will kick my opponent's shin with the ball of my foot. Sometimes I do this in order to take my opponent down, and other times I do it to force my opponent to move his hips backward, which opens up other opportunities. So, there are a few striking techniques you can do from close range. The second strike I will do from this position is a foot stomp. I lift one leg up and then drive my heel down into my opponent's toes. It is also possible to land a knee to your opponent's thigh from this position. If you land the strike and your opponent moves his hips back to avoid another shot, then you can now target his body with a knee strike. Other side now. I can kick to his shin, and I can stomp on his toes. If he backs his hips away to avoid your strikes, then you have the space you need to knee his chest or stomach. Now I will show a movement that is very common in sumo, wrestling, and mixed martial arts when in the neutral tie-up position. Again, both my opponent and me have an overhook and an underhook. I place the back of my left hand to the inside of his right leg, and as I lift that leg up using my hand, I pull his opposite shoulder downward using my right arm. So, you do two movements at once. One arm lifts your opponent's leg, and the other arm pulls his shoulder down. You secure, enter, and pull. When you execute this technique, you can either fall down on top of your opponent or remain standing.
Segurou. Entro aqui e puxo. Aqui. Como eu posso ficar em pé? Ou posso cair já abraçado, passando a guarda. Movimento um pouquinho mais rápido. Vai mais. Puxei. Aí.
I can fall here,
Posso cair aqui ou aqui.
or here.
Se eu quiser, posso
If I
ficar
like, I can stay here.
do outro lado.
With my right arm, I pull down on my opponent's shoulder. With my opposite hand, I lift his right leg. I can either fall with my opponent and obtain side control, or I can remain on my feet.
Fiz a pegada. Puxo.
Now I demonstrate a wrestling takedown that is executed from an over-under body lock.
Essa é uma queda muito utilizada.
Notice how I'm gripping my hands together in the small of my opponent's back. It is also important that I use my elbow to clamp down on my opponent's underhook. From this position, you step your rear foot to the outside of your opponent's lead leg. It is a crucial movement that a lot of people do wrong. So I step my rear leg behind my opponent's lead leg and then use my control of his upper body to force him back into my leg.
Essa perna vai entrar assim. Segurou.
I accomplish this by rotating my body in a counterclockwise direction. So I pummel for position, which is very common in wrestling, establish an over-under body lock, tighten my elbow down on my opponent's underhook, step forward, and bump him so he sits back on my leg and trips to the mat. As my opponent sits down on my leg, that's when I fall. One step and then the takedown. Notice how when I fall, I step my leg behind both of my opponent's legs. This will prevent him from stepping and re-establishing his base. Now I show a takedown that involves a knee strike. It is important to notice that I have changed my grips from the previous technique. I wrap my left arm around my opponent's underhook. Instead of clasping my hands together behind my opponent's back to secure a body lock, you want to make sure that your grip is nice and tight. Your direction also changes.
E entro. Vou entrar dessa forma, ó. Para trás.
Instead of tripping your opponent forward, you trip him backward.